Welcome to the Women Talk podcast, where ordinary women share their extraordinary stories. We would love for you to share your story on our podcast. Go to www.womentalk.ca and apply to share your story. And now let's welcome your host, founder, and CEO of Women Talk, Bridget Lessard-Diel.
Welcome back to the Women Talk podcast, where women make their communities stronger one story at a time. Today my guest is Elizabeth Macarthur, an award-winning radical living master who dedicates her expertise and insights to resolving an issue that has not only caused her supreme resentment and frustration in the past, but continues to tyrannize thousands of others as well. She shares her journey through forgiveness.
Hi. So what does forgiveness have to do with me? Well, there was a time in my life that if you had told me that I needed to do some forgiveness, I probably would have just walked away from you. In fact, I remember attending my very first personal development weekend in 1996. And on that Saturday afternoon, the facilitator talked about the power of forgiveness. I remember sitting in my seat and thinking to myself things like, yeah, but he doesn't know what they did to me. And he doesn't know how much they hurt me. And he doesn't know my story. Because we all have those stories, right? And then I thought, I'm going to tell him he's wrong. Sure enough, when break time came, I went up to the facilitator and told him that I would not be doing forgiveness on these people because they didn't deserve it. And he didn't know what they had done to me, and he didn't know what my story was. And on and on and on I went. And all the facilitator did was listen till I was done. And then he said to me, so what has holding on to all this unforgiveness cost you in your life? Well, that stopped me in my tracks for a moment because I knew my life had not turned out the way I thought it was. I was in my 30s and my life looked very different than I thought it would at this time. In fact, I had just spent a couple of years living in my parents' basement. And while I was there, I realized that this was not the life I had signed up for. And I didn't understand why I hadn't been married, why I hadn't started my family, and why I was having a tough time making ends meet. So even though the facilitator talked about forgiveness that day, I really wasn't ready to hear it. I did, however, continue on with my personal growth and healing journey. I continued to take different workshops to experience different modalities, and it actually created a huge difference in my life. I know along the way I had inadvertently done forgiveness work. I was feeling much happier. I was much more satisfied with my life, and things were going much better. But I knew there was still something missing. There was still something bugging me. Although the results I were getting were good, I still couldn't figure out why it wasn't even better, why they weren't great. And then I came across the book called Radical Forgiveness. I hesitated before reading it, but I knew I had to read it, and I had to look at my forgiveness issues. When I finished reading the book, I wanted to try out the process to see just how it might work. So I decided to work on an issue I had with a sibling. So I took the issue and I ran it through the radical forgiveness process, and I was amazed at what the end result was for me. I felt the negative energy shift out and change for me, and I was no longer feeling the same amount of hurt or resentment or betrayal or anger that I had attached to my story. What I realized was I was letting go of some of that stuck negative energy in me that was affecting all areas of my life. And I started to realize what the lack of forgiveness in my life had created for me, a life I really didn't want. I really started to understand how my unwillingness to forgive others for what I perceived they did to me was connected to how my life was going today. So I sat down and started making a list of all the people I was still mad at or hurt by for one reason or another. And it was a long list. But I was ready to jump in with both feet and to do some work. And that's when things really started to shift. I was even working on issues I thought I was finished with, only to realize that there was still some negative energy left, but the radical forgiveness tools were finishing it all off. And then I started to become really good at recognizing the triggers of the day, those things that were still happening and invoking negative emotions in my life, and I would be started doing worksheets on them. So, for example, a few years back, I was let go from a job where my boss was a female, and that triggered a whole bunch of things for me. So I decided to do a worksheet on it and realized that the very first job I had, a similar thing happened. I was fresh out of college with little to no experience. I was living in Calgary and had gotten a job in a bank working in the mailroom. Then one day, the estates division lawyer's assistant left and they were looking. So I applied and I got the job. I was so happy. However, it did not last long. Mostly what I remember was that one day I was told I was doing a great job by my female boss. And the next day I was let go by HR because my work wasn't good enough. I was devastated. I was hurt, angry, frustrated, and confused, and felt very betrayed. And at 21-ish, I had no idea to do with that. So, like everything else, I stuffed it down and ignored it. It was my very first job, and I wasn't even sure why I had been let go, as I had been told two different stories. It had a lasting effect on me. And now, here it was showing up in my life again several years later. I was so grateful for the radical forgiveness tools that were helping me shift out this energy by dealing with a more recent experience. And as I continue to use the radical forgiveness tools and also the self-forgiveness tools, I can feel myself becoming lighter and lighter as I am releasing more and more of the negative energies that I had stuffed into my subconscious. I was becoming a much happier, peaceful person, and I started having a lot more fun in my life too. So what does forgiveness have to do with me? Everything. I now know that anytime something happens to me and I choose to hold onto it and stuff down that negative energy into my subconscious, I am creating patterns of energy blocks that are preventing me from living a joyful life. It is up to me to do my own forgiveness work, and radical forgiveness and self-forgiveness have been the tools that have helped me do that. It's like this was the next big piece of the puzzle to my healing journey tools that I was looking for to once and for all release much more of my healing. I am forever grateful that radical forgiveness came into my life and continue to use these tools every day.
Hey ladies, have you heard about our Women Talk Convention and Expo yet? It's an enlightening and entertaining event aimed at women looking for a more meaningful life and deeper connections. And we will ignite the fire and give you momentum to explore new possibilities. It's 3 days, 17 speakers, 2 workshops, 2 parties, including the amazing comedian Shirley Best. All of this for only $197. And today I'm making the deal even sweeter for you. The first 20 women to go online and buy their tickets using coupon code PODCAST will receive $50 off. That's 17 speakers, 2 parties, 2 workshops, all of it for only $147. You can't miss an offer like that. Now go to womentalk.ca/convention and use coupon code PODCAST. And I promise this will be a weekend you will never forget. And now back to Elizabeth Macarthur and her story of forgiveness. Well, that's a powerful story.
Thank you.
How long do you think it has taken you to get to this place where you really feel good about forgiveness, that you really feel like you've dealt with everything, or have you?
Well, everything is a pretty big word. I haven't dealt with everything, but I've dealt with so much. And what I like about the forgiveness tools is how it's helping me move through stuff now. You know, because I believe we're all on a journey. All our journeys are individual. And I don't know how long it's going to take. I don't know if we even finish it in this lifetime. But
yeah, I guess it's something you kind of have to always deal with.
Yeah, but I do know when I got something pressing on me in the moment, I have a phenomenal tool that will take that pressure and that stress away by releasing the resentment and the hurt and the anger. To me, that's the value in this tool.
Give me an example of one of the tools that you're using. What do you do? What do you use? Like just one quick example.
So in the coaching business that I do, I use a worksheet. So Radical Forgiveness has a 21-step worksheet that takes you from your, what we call our victim story, and that's the story of somebody did something to us. And we're going to start there because that's where we're all stuck. And we're going to work with that story, and we're going to take it through the stages of radical forgiveness through the use of a worksheet. And we're going to transform that story into a story of gratitude by reframing the story from a different perspective.
I love that. So do you walk around, meeting people and talking with people and saying to yourself, whoa, this person has some work to do? Like, do you get a real quick feeling on people if they have a lot of work to do?
Well, I think that it's a tool that anybody can use. And I think it has value to everybody. And it would be varying in degrees to where people are in their own journey. If people have already done quite a bit of work, then, it's a great tool to keep it going. If they've never done any work on themselves, it's a great tool to get you going. So I try not to judge people like that, because I want to be in conversation with people just to be in conversation and connect. Mm-hmm. But overall, I do believe that most people can use this tool. Is everybody ready for it? No. Is everybody in that spot in their journey where they're looking for it? No. So I look for those people who are open, willing, ready, and looking.
I love that. Yeah, because that's where it has to start. Now tell me, do you think we're born with an issue with forgiveness, or is it something that happens along the way? What do you think?
Well, see, radical forgiveness is more than just a tool. It's actually a philosophy. And it has a whole line of assumptions behind it that resonate with me. And basically what it says is that we come here to have certain experiences so that we can have them and heal from them for our own soul's growth and evolution. So to answer your question, yes, I do believe that we come here to have certain experiences so that we can do forgiveness work and create that type of a learning environment for our soul. And we're in the perfect place to do it because Earth is a place of duality. And it's the perfect environment to have these experiences to go from one side of it to the other.
For sure. That's a given. Now tell me, what was your childhood like?
Well, I was picked on a lot. Never felt like I belonged. Always felt like I was odd man out. Don't recall it being really happy. I mean, not that it was really bad or anything, but just don't, recall it being I recall it being tough. I guess that would be a word I would use, would be tough. And I just grew up, felt always feeling like I didn't fit in and tried to fit in, or people didn't like me, or, people didn't want to hang out with me, always being picked on. I had red hair, so I got picked on a lot because of that, or just whatever the flavor of the day was.
Kids always find something, if it's not your hair, it's your parents, it's your nose, there's always something.
Exactly.
Kids are just cruel.
Sometimes they are. So when I grew up, by the time I was a young adult, I would say I was very angry at the world. I was very hurt. I couldn't understand why things didn't work for me, but how could they work for me when I was carrying so much on forgiveness? And it really is a great tool or a great modality to let go of that negative energy we're holding inside of ourselves. Because as you know, it's all energy. And that energy, when it's floating around inside of ourselves, does damage, either emotionally or physically, right? It has an impact on our life and on our bodies.
What was that course you took in the 90s, that very first self-improvement course? What kind of a class was that?
It was called Personal Mastery. And it was like a Friday night, Saturday, Sunday course through a company out of the States that are actually still going today. And it was my first introduction to the world of personal development / alternative modalities or holistic modalities in that workshop genre. And I fell in love with the industry that weekend because of what I learned about myself, even though I did challenge the facilitator and wasn't going to do the forgiveness part. I still got a lot of stuff from that weekend, and it really opened my eyes to a different way of dealing with whatever life was, right?
A different way of looking at life, for sure.
Yeah.
What do you think? Where do you think sharing our stories fit in with forgiveness?
Well, it's all on how we share our stories. Because I could share my victim stories till the cows come home, but if that's all I'm doing, all I'm really creating there is a momentary relief. Because I'm expressing my emotions, but I'm not doing anything with them. I'm just expressing them. So when I'm done with the story, even though they've been expressed and I feel a little better, they're still returning back into my body because the story is still living in there. So with the radical forgiveness tools, it's a process. You express your story because you start with your victim story, and then we're going to look at the feelings, and then we're going to collapse the story, and then we're going to reframe the story, and then we're going to integrate the new story. So it's actually a 5-stage process that works with the story until the energy is released. It's a very different way of sharing our story.
And do you use any kind of physical, like tapping or anything like that during that process?
No, I do not. Just the coaching and the worksheet.
And how long does it usually take people to go through the process? I mean, knowing that it's always a work in progress, but usually how long do people work with you?
Oh, you mean continue to work with me? I have a variation from people who want to come and learn the worksheet, because I teach the worksheet in my coaching. That's the very first thing I do, because I want them to have a tool they could use at home themselves as well. So I have people who come with a specific issue. They want to work on that, and they learn the worksheet. So they'll buy the introductory package. They come do that, and I may not see them again. I have other people that I've worked with for anywhere from 9 months to a year and a half, depending on how much work you want to do.
What was the most incredible story that has come out of what you do? Or the best story, or the most fascinating, maybe, kind of outcome?
Well, I'll tell you this story, and I have permission from my client to share this particular story because I thought it was to me, it was totally fascinating. And she came to a session and she wasn't really sure what she wanted to work on that day. So I usually, ask some questions. So what's been going on in the last week? And we talked a bit. And she proceeded to tell me that in the last week, she was traveling down the highway and she hit a deer. It came out running across the road. She hit it. It landed in the ditch and was severely injured and probably died there. And she had phoned whoever, but she had left it there, but was pretty sure it was going to die. And she was devastated because she hit this deer. And as she's telling the story, like she's emotional and she's crying, and I'm thinking, yeah, we're going to work on that one today. So we proceeded to work on it. And as we're working through the story, what we uncovered was what that represented to her. It was part of a pattern of her feeling like she was the one that was responsible for everything else. And when anything didn't go right, she was always taking the blame for it, whether it was her fault or not. So she was looking at that deer from the perspective of, oh my gosh, I killed this deer. He's part of a herd. We know that. What if he was the leader? What if he was the breadwinner? What if he was the one bringing the food back and now he's not? And there's these other deer back there that don't have him and they don't know where he is. And she was doing this whole story in her head that she was literally making up because she had no idea, right? And that's what we do. We make stuff up and as a way of telling a story. But everything she said in that story that she related to the deer actually applied to her life, because everything that we do is in patterns. Yes. We all have patterns from core negative beliefs that keep showing up over and over again. It's kind of like I call, the same shit, different day syndrome.
Yeah.
Right?
So and we all do it.
Oh, yes, we do. And this was part of a pattern. And one of the other things I love about the radical forgiveness work is that you can use a current day issue. And when you work on that and dissolve the energy around that and get it down to zero, it takes the whole pattern out with it, right back to the initial event without even having to know what the initial event was. It's taken the whole thing out.
Wow. So, and how has she been changed from doing this?
She's a totally different person than I met when I first met her. She actually was another one that was quite angry at the world. And she sat in front of me first time with her arms folded, glaring at me. And I'm thinking, oh, this is going to be fun. And it's been a blast. And now she's just so happy and she's relaxed and her body is different. Her facial features are different. Her life is starting to work for her again. She's making different decisions. She's moving ahead on things that she's wanted to move on. She's literally changing her life through this work.
Yeah, I can totally see this, and how it can change your whole life, your whole outview on life when you don't have all this, anger inside and all this forgiveness work to do.
See, it could be anger, it could be hurt, it could be disappointment, it could be resentment, it could be frustration, it could be betrayal. It could be any of those words we use to describe negative energy.
Yeah.
It's any of that, right?
Yeah.
Because it's all creating blocks. And just to finish the story of the deer story, by the time we had finished the worksheet on that and dissolved all of that out, she was able to shift for herself that feeling responsible for what happens to everybody else, and was able to make some decisions on some things that she wanted to do, but hadn't been able to do because she was too worried and concerned about how that would affect other people. And she left that day just feeling very grounded and very solid and knowing what she needed to do for herself. Because we don't know how other people are going to act or react when we do things. But if we allow that to control us, then we never do what we're supposed to do, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Right? So she's taking back control of her life.
It's beautiful. I love it. So if people would like to find out a little bit more about your program, Radical Forgiveness, where can they get a hold of you?
they can go onto my website, which is www.breakthroughs with an S. So that's breakthroughsabounding.com. And I do a complimentary discovery call, which is a 50-minute call where I talk about a little bit about what the radical forgiveness work is, and then I actually put you through an exercise so that you can see where would be some areas or who's hanging on in there that you could do some work on to let go. And so that takes about 50 minutes. That's complimentary. If you go onto my website, there's links on several pages that will get you into my scheduling system, where you would just go in and you would just book your time, and then we would connect. I do those by phone or by Zoom, whichever people prefer.
Beautiful.
That's
now, can you
usually
spell
the first step?
Can you spell your website for me?
Of course. It's breakthroughsabounding.com. Breakthroughsabounding.com.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much. That was very informative. And I hope that you keep on helping many women let go of this anger that's been there for a long time.
Thank you very much for your time, Bridget. I appreciate you interviewing me for the podcast.
Perfect. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
If you have a burning desire to share your story with our audience, apply to be on our podcast. To apply and find a full list of our podcasts, go to www.womentalk.ca.